Hi, thanks so much for joining me on the Listen Up Girl podcast, your daily LGBTQ plus news podcast. I'm your host, Zach Randall Friedman. Today is Saturday, June 6, 2026, and it's day 6 of Pride Month. And today the theme is power. Who has it, who's fighting for it, and who is taking it away? We've got a clean sweep for LGBTQ plus candidates in California's primaries, a 15-year-old trans athlete who just won at the state level and is now staring down the Supreme Court, two decorated Seattle police officers who say they were passed over for promotions because they're gay, new polling that completely contradicts the pride is over narrative that the right keeps pushing, a historic win for trans people in Kenya, and a look back at what pride actually looked like 40 years ago. So let's get into it. Our first story is LGBTQ plus candidates sweep the California primaries. So we start with a genuinely good day at the ballot box. California held its primaries this week, and LGBTQ plus candidates running for Congress, it was, in words of one organizer, a clean sweep. Two Democratic incumbents dominated their races, and two new contenders advanced to the November general election. The headline name is State Senator Scott Wiener. In San Francisco, Wiener took more than 42% of the vote in the race to fill the seat, being vacated by Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi. That's not a small seat. That is one of the most storied congressional seats in the country, and an openly gay state senator just became the clear frontrunner to hold it. And Wiener was direct about what his win means. He said he'll go to the mat to defend immigrants and trans people, naming those communities specifically on primary night in 2026, when a whole lot of politicians are doing the opposite. Here's why that matters beyond one race. The story this year has been about retreat, corporations backing away, politicians going quiet. California voters just sent the opposite message. When given the choice, they didn't run from LGBTQ plus candidates, they elected them and advanced more of them. That's the clear message the organizers were talking about. Amazing. Love it. Next, a trans student won at state, and now the Supreme Court may ban her. Our second story is about a 15-year-old who has been fighting for the right to play since she was 11 years old. She's a trans student athlete in West Virginia, and she won at the state championship level. That should be the whole story. A teenager works hard, competes, and wins. But her case is now tied to one of the most consequential trans rights fights in the country, because the case known as West Virginia versus B.P.J. The question in front of the Supreme Court is whether states can bar trans girls from girls' sports entirely. And this comes on the heels of the court's broader posture on trans issues over the last year. So this young woman is in a position of celebrating a state title with one hand, while the highest court in the country decides whether she'll be allowed to compete at all. So think about the timeline for a second. She started fighting at 11. She's 15 now. That is 4 years of her childhood spent in courtrooms and headlines, just for the right to be on the team with her friends. Whatever the court decides, remember that there is a kid at the center of this, not a talking point, a child. Next, in Seattle, Seattle officers say they were denied promotions because they were gay. A discrimination case out in Seattle. Two veteran officers, Detective Anna Fishel and Lieutenant Douglas Raguso, are accusing the Seattle Police Department of refusing to promote them because they are gay. And these are not marginal performers. According to the complaint, both officers have excelled in their roles and both sat at the top of their respective promotion lists. Top of the list and passed over anyway. What makes this one land is it cuts against a comfortable assumption a lot of people hold, that workplace discrimination against LGBTQ plus people is a thing of the past or something that only happens in certain industries or certain parts of the country. This is a major police department in one of the most progressive cities in America, and two of its own officers saying bias reached all the way into who gets to lead. We'll be watching this, how the department responds, but the allegation alone is a reminder that being out at work still carries a cost for a lot of people, even the ones at the top of the list. Next, we go to most Americans still back pride and brands that support it. So now let's talk about the narrative versus the numbers. You've heard all year that corporate America is fleeing pride, sponsors pulling out, corporate companies going quiet under pressure, and some of that is very real. But new polling this week tells a very different story about where the actual voters stand. In a survey, 68% of registered voters agreed that companies have the right to show support for LGBTQ plus community. That is more than 2/3. And the polling also found that broad support for politicians who push back against anti-LGBTQ plus attacks rather than the ones leading them. So here's the disconnect. The corporate pullback we've been covering isn't being driven by public opinion. The public, by a wide margin, is fine with brands backing pride. The retreat is being driven by political pressure from the top, from an administration led by the orange convicted felon that has made hostility to our community a defining policy. Companies aren't following their customers, they're following the threats. That's an important thing to hold on to during a month like this. When a brand goes silent, that's a business decision made under pressure. It's not the country turning on you. The numbers say the country is still, by clear majority, on our side. Nice to hear, but the orange convicted felon's doing everything he can to push us down. Next, Kenya orders trans legal recognition a continental first. For our international story, some real concrete progress out of Kenya. A Kenyan court has ruled that the state must consider applications to change sex and gender markers on official documents and directed the government to introduce legislation protecting trans people. According to ILGA World, which tracks LGBTQ plus rights globally, that combination, recognition plus a mandate for protective legislation, is a continental first for Africa. And Kenya wasn't alone in a new data ILGA released for Pride Month. In Romania, a court confirmed the obligation to recognize a gender identity that was legally registered in another EU country. In Poland, the Supreme Administrative Court confirmed that refusing to transcribe same-sex marriages performed abroad is incompatible with the EU law. So I want to sit with Kenya ruling specifically because we spent a lot of time covering crackdowns across the African continent, and those are real and they are serious. So when a court in Kenya orders its own government to recognize trans people and write protections into law, that is not a small thing. That is a door opening in a place where a lot of people assumed it was bolted shut. Progress is uneven and it's global, and this week it moved a little forward. Next, what Pride looked like 40 years ago. And they close to day 6, a little perspective from someone who was here at the beginning. The organizer, Omaha, Nebraska's first Pride March back in 1985, spoke this week about how much has changed, and the picture painted is sobering. He described marchers in 1985 wearing paper bags over their heads because being seen at a Pride event could cost you your job, your family, and your safety. There were no Pride flags, there were no floats, and some people who showed up that day were assaulted for it. Paper bags over their head, that was 40 years ago, within the lifetime of plenty of people listening to this right now. I bring this up on day 6 because Pride in 2026 is hard. We are covering the courts, pullbacks, and attacks every single day on this show. But the distance between a person marching with a bag over their head in 1985 and Scott Wiener naming trans people from a victory stage in 2026, that distance is real, and it was built by people who refused to stay hidden, even when the hiding was the safer choice. The fight is not over, but look how the far right has already carried us. So that's your show for Saturday, June 6th, day 6 of Pride. The headlines today included LGBTQ plus candidates swept California's primaries, with Scott Wiener leading the race for Pelosi's seat. A 15-year-old trans athlete won a state while the Supreme Court weighs in whether to ban trans girls from sports. 2 top Seattle police officers say they were denied promotions for just being gay. New polling shows 68% of voters back companies' right to support Pride. A Kenyan court ordered trans legal recognition, the first for the continent. And the organizer of Omaha's first 1985 Pride March reminded us how far we've come from paper bags to victory speeches. So this is Listen Up Girl, LGBTQ plus news podcast. Stay informed, stay loud, and I'll see you tomorrow with more news. Please share this if this episode resonated with you. And please leave a review on Spotify, Apple, any platform that you're listening to this on, because the more reviews I receive, the more people hear this podcast. Thanks for listening. I'll be back tomorrow.